What's up, guys? My name's Foz, aka 7 Ounce the Producer. I wanted to start this series because it's been a while and I just want to go through some workflow changes that I've added into the way that I write as a producer for beats, be it pop, hip hop, EDM, anything, rock and roll. And so I'm going to share that with you today. Check this out. So as you can see, we're inside of my Ableton session. My session is not very complicated at all. We're starting off with Maschine 2, an instance of Maschine 2. As you can see, MIDI coming out of Maschine 2 into these 4 MIDI tracks. That means anything that I do in Maschine is going to affect and trigger the sounds in anything I drop into these 4 tracks. To my right is my Maschine Mark III. That was courtesy of Native Instruments. Shout out to Native Instruments. You guys are awesome. And at the center of my setup is my Ableton Push 2. And I get a lot of my work between the mouse and the Push 2, helps me work quickly. I worked Maschine in because I've always used it as a sketch pad. Before I owned, NI sent me this one, I actually owned the Micro, which is really fun. I love the size. And I really just use it as a sketch pad, just get a few ideas out and then take the audio, dump them into Ableton, go crazy. So the way I have it set up right now is I actually use my Maschine Mark III to trigger chords because I'm not much of a keys player. So it's a lot easier for me to do this. Plus I like that it has the chord sets built in and the pads are to my right and I can free up my Push 2 to do other things. I love using my Push 2, but I have 2 hands. It makes sense for me. So what I'm doing right now is I'm making adjustments on my Maschine Mark III. As I am in chord mode, I'm picking a chord set. I put it into a minor. So it's going to be an E minor. I set the key and the octave that I'm going to start off in. And you guys should be hearing this, but there's nothing, right? I have to pick a sound. So naturally, I usually start with pretty basic. I'm a fan of a lot of my packs in Ableton, but I have become very accustomed to using XLN Audio addictive keys. So it's become pretty much my go-to as a starting point. And in addictive keys, I own 2. I have the Studio Grand and I have the Rhodes. Depending on style and what I'm feeling like working on, it could swap at any time. If it's hip-hop R&B-ish, it's definitely going to be the Rhodes. But if it's pop or anything else, I'm definitely going to stick with the Studio Grand. So now we should hear some sounds trigger. And that's how I get started. I'm a guitar player, so my guitar is never that far away. So if you don't mind, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to grab it. This is my Fender Jaguar HH. Great guitar. Love its sound. I do have it tuned to E standard right now. I put the song in the key of E minor, so there's going to be a lot of this going on. I don't always start with guitar and I don't always start with keys. Great thing about the Maschine Mark III is that it has the chords set out chromatically and according to scale. And anything I see here, I can do on guitar. So it gives me a strong idea where I want to go. So I just got to pick where I want to start. Usually the easiest thing for me to do is just hammer out a progression on guitar, translate it here, and then go back and throw some guitar parts over it. Okay, I know where I want to go with it. So this is why I like having it to the right side. I also have a guitar in my hand. So I'm just going to throw in a quick progression and then follow along with some guitar. BPM wise, I'm going to keep it pretty slow. We'll start at 100 and see where it goes. Make sure I have my metronome on. And I always like to add something a little different right at the end of a progression, you know, just so it's not so static. I didn't really play anything technical like on the rhythm, so I'm gonna go ahead, Command A, Command U, get everybody on the grid, fold it up. Really easy. Gets me in the groove, gets me like start, you know, feeling like I want to write some stuff. And I do go bit by bit. That's why, again, I like to have my stuff easily accessible. I don't go too crazy and just kind of like stick to one flow because it gets boring. And I used to do it. I used to be like, I'm going to lay down my chords, I'm going to lay down my beat, then I'm going to do everything else. Now it's like I feel more free in my creativity just to kind of jam and feel live when I'm doing stuff, and instead of just being like constantly editing. That's the other thing. I always tell people, just write, record your ideas, get something out, and then go back and, you know, go ahead and start being picky. So let's throw in some guitars. I should be set up for this. I'm using Apollo Mark 1. It's the Duo, and I've been meaning to update, but they're just so good. There's really no reason yet. Maybe I'll send it to Black Lion, get one of those kind of upgrades that they do. It's kind of cool. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit Command R. Rename this GTR_01, just in case I end up taking it to something like Studio One later for mixing. The studio I work out of actually happens to be a Studio One Personas based studio, so I'm in between both worlds of Ableton and Studio One. Always learning something new. Okay, cool. So I can go ahead and set up my clip here and just drop it in and jam away. Or maybe I should noodle a little bit. Throw in some quick licks, see what I like about it. Always like to put a little bit of flavor, see what I can come up with. I'm gonna go in here, and I already have my warping on, but I have not set Complex Pro as my default. I used to do it, but I noticed that since I set it as default and it uses a little bit extra CPU, I tend to kind of like would have a really slow startup. So I just do it manually now. I don't know if it's me, my computer, but for the most part, Live 10 since the release. Shout out to Ableton Live. Those are my peoples. I'm actually an organizer for them here in Houston, Texas. So if you're ever interested in talking about Ableton or learning something new one-on-one or as a group, reach out. So I definitely like the first half, a lot less flubs. And let me fix my timing a bit. It's not terrible, but I can do better. Sometimes it's just as much as nudging like the second transient. I try not to kill too much of the swing because it's groove, right? You know, you get a little groove out of there. Yeah, that was the ticket. And right now, I'm not using any kind of amp emulation yet, but my favorite go-to built into Ableton is always going to just be amp. And for blues, R&B, you know, it's the blues setting is great. I'll even grab cabinet and just put like a 112 on it. Really, there's not a lot to mess with. It's going to get grittier, so I'm definitely going to pull the volume down on this guy. So you see it brings out like those harmonics and characteristics of the guitar. And the soft tube actually makes amp, or they designed amp inside Ableton Live 10. So if you're a universal audio guy, you know, there's not much difference outside of like the external DSP. You're still getting that great quality from soft tube. And that's usually my starting point. And really, like, from this point, I'm gonna go ahead and start getting my samples together for drums, and I'll catch you guys next time.